Resuming debate, recuse de débat, the honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's great to see you in that seat. As I said to you off camera, it's a long time coming, and it's great to see you there. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to send a huge thank you to the hardworking people of Caribou, Prince George for once again placing their trust in me to represent them for the fourth time.
Absolutely.
Mr. Speaker, my time is short today, so I rise not only to respond to the speech from the throne, but to address and confront a national tragedy that is shattering lives and communities, Canada's opioid crisis. Since 2016, over 51,000 Canadians have died from opioid overdose. These are not just numbers. They are our loved ones. They're stolen by a crisis fueled by the proliferation of fentanyl coupled with the horrendous policy by both federal and provincial governments. In British Columbia alone, overdose is now the leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 18. I'll say that again. The leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 18 in my province of British Columbia is overdose. This is unacceptable. Yet in the Liberal speech from the throne, there wasn't a single mention of this catastrophe. 2,500 words, not a single reference to the opioid crisis killing thousands and thousands of Canadians every year. On average, 17 Canadians lose their life every day due to overdose. And those are just the numbers we know, Mr. Speaker. But perhaps that's by design. After all, during his recent leadership race, our new Prime Minister stood before Canadians and said publicly that the overdose issue was a challenge, but not a crisis. As a matter of fact, he repeated it. He said, it's a challenge, but not a crisis. The opioid crisis has been exacerbated by the Liberal government's misguided drug policies and catch and release criminal justice reforms. These policies must be ended immediately. They have left our streets less safe, our communities more vulnerable, and they're not saving any lives. They're just perpetuating addiction with no end in sight. The opioid epidemic is a public safety disaster. British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario account for 83% of all opioid deaths, but no community is spared, large or small. The opioid crisis knows no social boundaries. In fact, just this week, my hometown of Williams Lake, the City Council passed a motion to explore declaring a state of emergency in response to the rising incidents of vandalism, open drug use, fires in front of businesses, theft, public indecency, defecation, and more. City Councillor Scott Nelson said the following regarding the crisis. Things have gotten so crazy, so bad, so out of control, our resources as a community are depleted in terms of what's taken place. In the last 2 days, we're having on average 10 to 20, possibly even 30 overdoses each day. That's astonishing, Mr. Speaker. This isn't Vancouver or Toronto. This is a small community of 10,000 people. And look what they're experiencing, what they've been forced to do after 10 years of failed Liberal policies. Addiction fuels crime, homelessness, and social disorder. Yet the Liberals have prioritized harm reduction at the expense of prevention and recovery. The Liberal government's failure to address the opioid crisis in their speech from the throne, despite very briefly mentioning border security and fentanyl trafficking in an attempt to appease President Trump, ignores the economic and human toll of the opioid crisis and sends a clear signal to Canadians struggling with addiction that their new federal government couldn't care less about them. Over the last 10 years, the Liberal government's failed drug policies have done nothing to curb deaths. British Columbia's 2023 decriminalization experiment, fully supported by the Liberal government, allows possession and public use of hard drugs like heroin, fentanyl, and cocaine. Despite being marketed as a solution, BC's overdose death rate is the highest in Canada. Public drug use has surged, straining communities and first responders. We hear reports of needles scattered around parks, playgrounds, and sidewalks. Kids playing soccer in the Lower Mainland have to dodge contaminated needles on the field. Safe consumption sites are allowed to operate right beside high schools, in doing so promoting open drug use to young and vulnerable Canadians and falsely marketing it as safe. So-called safe supply programs are an absolute, abject disaster. Diversion of these drugs into the black market fuels the illegal drug trade, as many experts have admitted, but which the Liberal government has tried to cover up for years and demean anyone for speaking their uncomfortable truths. In November 2024, retired Prince George RCMP Superintendent Sean Wright testified on the opioid crisis at our Parliamentary Health Committee. Mr. Wright, who has decades of experience in frontline policing, said the decriminalization experiment was the worst, most horrific failure of public policy in the history of BC. Mr. Speaker, this is a side of decriminalization experiment that the Liberal politicians in Ottawa bubble won't see, don't see, and do not want you to understand or see. Our communities are unsafe, and our constituents feel unwelcome in their own neighborhoods. This government must commit to not expanding the failed decriminalization experiment to anywhere else in Canada, and to halt all attempts to bring it forward legislation of deadly hard drugs, as some Liberals have suggested. Furthermore, the $1 billion spent by the Liberals, as mentioned earlier by one of our colleagues, has solved nothing. What do we have to show for it? More deaths, more families torn apart, more communities on the brink of extinction, and no hope in sight. I asked that member, take a look around your community. Does it look the same way as it did 10 years ago before the first Liberal reign in 2015? It doesn't. Treatment access remains severely limited, and supervised consumption sites simply do not address addiction's root causes. The throne speech's silence on the crisis missed a critical opportunity to prioritize treatment and recovery. It baffles me a little, Mr. Speaker, because we've had a plan to fight for recovery. In our Conservative platform, we highlighted how we would create 50,000 new beds for recovery to honour the 50,000 Canadians who have died from the crisis. The Liberals stole so many ideas from our plan, the GSC cut on housing, income tax cuts, etc. I strongly encourage them to steal this plan as well and get to work creating those 50,000 beds. There's another side to the drug crisis as well, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government's criminal justice reforms, most notably C5, have made things many times worse. By eliminating mandatory minimum penalties for certain drug-related offences, Bill C5 is a catch-and-release policy that lets traffickers off with nothing but a slap on the wrist. In our communities, 98% of the crime that is committed by 5 or 6 prolific offenders in one of my communities and 30 in my largest community of Prince George. When they're in jail, the crime rate goes down. When they're out of jail, the crime rate goes up. As a matter of fact, one of my constituents, Bob Hubbard, returned home last fall. When he returned home, he found his house being looted by a group of drug addicts. He tried to stop them. In the process of stopping them, they ran him over with his own vehicle, and they left him for dead on the highway, on the road. Wow. Those perpetrators were caught the very same day, and within 24 hours after leaving Mr. Hubbard dead on the road, they were out committing more crimes in our community. That's the reality that we live in. Mr. Speaker, we also have businesses that have been broken into, their windows smashed, their doorways set on fire so many times that they can't get the necessary insurance to operate their businesses. So they choose not to report these incidents, or they close shop altogether, leaving our downtown cores a ghost town. That's the reality after 10 years of this Liberal government. Mr. Speaker, if you will indulge me, I have to leave with this. Canada's opioid crisis, with over 50,000 lives lost since 2016, is a tragedy ignored by the government's speech from the throne. I'll repeat. In BC, drug overdoses are the leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 18, a tragedy that hits home when I think of 13-year-old Brianna McDonald, who died alone from an overdose in a homeless encampment in Abbotsford late last August. Her story is a stark reminder of our failure to protect the most vulnerable. As leaders, we must do better. be better. Mr. Prime Minister, this is not just a challenge, it's a crisis. It demands urgent action, not silence. Your policies have failed Canadians, and Canadians demand a system that supports recovery, and punishes traffickers and restores safety. Let's honor Brianna and the thousands lost to this city by fighting for a future where no more lives are lost.
Questions, comments, questions et commentaires. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Madawaska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, Canadians spoke clearly. They want us to build an economy that works for everyone. We have an ambitious plan to reduce the cost of living and to build a strong economy, the most competitive in the G7. The message sent to us is a call for true change, and we want to reply to this. Will my Conservative colleagues respect the choice of Canadians and contribute to our efforts to strengthen our economy, or do like they did during the last Parliament? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, how does how does our honourable colleague stand up? I just mentioned that we had over 51,000 lives lost since 2016 to opioid crisis. I spoke of the horrific crisis that our country is gripped in, and he recites talking notes, speaking notes, Mr. Speaker. That's unacceptable.
Questions et commentaires.
Questions and comments. Honourable member for Côte-Nord, Kalawich-Kipishimash. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech and congratulate him as well, if I'm not mistaken, for his fourth election to this House. Like me, over the years, he has seen, well, sometimes when you don't tread water, you take a step back. He mentioned some things in his speech, and, for example, I talked about EI earlier. I'd like to know, what does he think about these broken promises from this government, particularly in terms of EI? Thank you.
For Caribou, Prince George.
Well, I appreciate our honourable colleagues' comments, Mr. Speaker. We see our colleagues on the Liberal branch say, well, it's a new government. It's a new day. Let's just forget about the last 10 years. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, Canadians, and they'll stand up and say, well, we've been elected a strong mandate. Yeah, well, the mandate was built on a lie, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and the new man, or the new Prime Minister was elected because he told Canadians he had a plan. What we've seen ever since his first day of being elected, he doesn't have a plan. There's no budget. He can't tell us what this strong roadmap to economic prosperity is. It's a wonder that his front bench is standing up there and using the silly talking points from the past.
Before we go to the next question, we'll just be judicious in our choice of words. Questions, comments. The honourable member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from Caribou, Prince George, for putting more light on this horrendous situation, which is only getting worse. Every member in this House sees it in the downtown and the communities that they come from. My question for the honourable member is, I haven't heard anyone on the other side actually defend any of these problems. When they do rise to speak, they speak about change. Do you take this as a tacit acknowledgement that indeed their drug decriminalization and safe supply experiment has failed? And beyond acknowledgement, do you think it's time for an apology? And beyond that, what changes should be made immediately?
The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
That's a great question, Mr. Speaker. Can you afford me another 10 minutes to answer it? You know, Mr. Speaker, we had the new Liberal member from Victoria that stood up for my province of Victoria. Said the first time in however many years they elected a Liberal candidate. That's shameful. You know, whole areas. A story just came out in the Globe and Mail. Whole areas of Victoria have turned into absolute ghetto and war zones. We have First Nations communities. We have communities all across our nation that have been drug-addled, crime-riddled, and absolute war zones. We have people that are living like zombies, Mr. Speaker, and that is not compassion. We have perpetuated their addictions. I absolutely believe that this Prime Minister should stand up on behalf of the Liberal Party that he represents and that Liberal caucus and apologize to Canadians for their abject failure over the last 10 years and for...
Questions and comments. A brief question from the member for Nunavut.
thank and congratulate the member for his re-election. I always appreciate his speeches. The opioid crisis has unfortunately reached my riding of Nunavut as well, which is surprising because all my communities are fly-in communities. And I wonder if he agrees that as a way to address that in my riding is to have better screening facilities both at mailing ports and at airports as well.
Member for Caribou Prince George.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I always appreciate our honourable colleagues' interventions. Mr. Speaker, in the Health Committee, we talked about better screening in areas such as airports, mail rooms, but also traceability for the safe supply that is going and being diverted. And at every step of the way, the Liberals denied that and said no to it, Mr. Speaker. It is a big issue, and it falls squarely at the foot of this Prime Minister.